All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Winters and Winters session as we close out the end of 2021, which is crazy for me to even think about. But we're joined today, of course, by Dan Winters, Head of Americas, as part of my counterpart here, for those of you joining us for the first time. And then we have two others that are joining us today as well. So Joshua Walker is joining from the Goby end as one of our ESG consultants. And then we also have John joining us from Mesirow Financial. So I'm going to quickly introduce him, and then we're also going to dive into a couple of great topics for today, and really thinking about what ESG can really mean, but also thinking ahead into 2022. So John, I love your title, by the way, if I start off with just that from a high level. You're VP of Acquisition of Finance and Head of ESG. So you're going to get questions about that today. That sounds like two separate roles right there. And then also really excited to hear about Mesirow Financial, and now just actually Mesirow, no longer Mesirow and Financial. Because one of the things I saw from your website was that you've had 8 decades of focus in corporate responsibility. And that's even before corporate responsibility, I feel like, was formally an ESG topic or thing, before sustainability was a thing. So very excited to have you today. Very excited to talk about Mesirow and your goals and what you guys have been doing and how you've been incorporating GRESB. But why don't we start with you? I would love for you to introduce yourself, introduce your company, and dive in.
Sure. Thank you, Michelle. As you said, I'm the Vice President of Acquisitions and Finance, as well as the Head of ESG with Mesirow. Going into the 80 years of corporate responsibility, it's kind of a really good way to explain who Mesirow is. So Mesirow was founded as an independent and employee-owned financial services firm that was invested in the interconnected success of our clients' communities and our workplace culture. So fast forward 80 years and we still hold on to that founder's vision. Corporate responsibility really fits in through sustainability, community engagement, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So Mesirow as a whole invests in what matters, and that is our clients, our communities where we live and work, and our culture.
And I love that. I love that those are all of the different components and pieces that you've always, because that's really what ESG is, right? That's the heart of what we're looking at when we think about ESG as a whole. Also, again, I'm going to give you a hard time a little bit. So you both finance and ESG, again, kind of two different roles. How does that work for you? Do you like that? Are you like, I don't know, I need another person? How are you feeling, and how does that work? And what are some of the pros maybe to that?
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. So I do love it. I'm a big picture or a whole picture kind of guy. So as the Vice President of Acquisitions and Finance, I ultimately see it before we even buy it. I'm a part of the team that's evaluating and underwriting potential deals, and then from there it goes into the asset management phase, and then we're kind of executing our strategy where I'm seeing it every month. I'm seeing every single property, so I do have a lot of access to the information. I see many different sides, so it was almost fitting once we saw the breadth of GRESB. It was only fitting that when we made that decision to sign on and align with GRESB, so it was fitting that I was the one, because I had my hands in all sorts of different pockets of our business.
The interesting thing about John's role is, it's spot on. Being part of acquisitions and finance, I believe that GRESB is structured non-financial data, and it goes to inform how the financials came about. So having somebody with this sort of wide breadth that's really honed in and focused on ESG is really to their benefit. And I will tell you that I remember the first time John and I met. It was back in 2017. One of the most prepared guys to talk about ESG that I've ever wandered into a meeting with before. So well done, John.
Thank you.
I couldn't agree more. John was really prepared. I liked it. He thought through everything methodically. Maybe that's that financial background coming in, but in each of those items in a row, which to your point, Dan, I think is right on par. And I think, and Joshua, you can comment on this as well, but I find it really interesting within ESG as a whole, I get asked all the time, what are the typical team member roles that are the lead for ESG initiatives? And it really is all over the place. It's either HR, it's legal, from a compliance standpoint. I don't see as often from the financial side, although you're not alone. There have been others that I've come across, but I agree with you. I think there's an element of it touches every single aspect, every stage of that process. So I think there's a lot of added value there. And Joshua, am I crazy in that? Is that just my perspective, or do you see the same?
Oh, you're right. I feel the same way. I'm someone who comes from a strictly sustainability background, but there are more ways, different ways to achieve the same goal here. And I think John brings a lot of value in his knowledge of the way that Mesirow works, the way that they do so many different things. He knows the company and he has the drive to take them into a higher impact in ESG with what they do best.
Well, there you go. I think that was a pretty good compliment your way, John.
I should volunteer for more of these. I'm just getting pads to my ego.
It's all true, all true. But I did think one of the first things that I noticed when we first engaged with you, one of the things you helped Mesirow kind of evaluate is that you did have a lot of things in different places. And I think your role kind of transitioning, or not transitioning, but really adding some of these ESG initiatives to your plate, saw some of the benefit of streamlining, having a centralized location, a centralized kind of almost hub that connects the dots in multiple areas. And that's one of the things I love about ESG in general, is that it really can be a central hub for all of these different teams and initiatives that need to come together. You also have multiple funds that also need to kind of correspond through these initiatives together. So would love to just hear from you in general of how you kind of navigated that some of the pros that came from that, challenges maybe, and are you kind of excited to where you've continued to move forward with of seeing those efficiencies?
Yeah, a lot there as well, but I'll do my best to answer. So you're right. We do have currently 3 funds, and for anyone that doesn't know, Mesirow has the traditional investment management competencies, but we also have this alternative space, and that would be direct real estate. And that's one of the things I often hear is, oh, I didn't know you guys do real estate. So we most definitely do. Our real estate team started back in 2007, kind of almost at the worst time. We worked through the initial fundraising, made our first investment in 2011, and since then we've already liquidated 1 fund. All of our funds are a value add strategy, but ultimately at this point, there's always going to be one that's being built. There's one that's being, kind of harvested. Our strategies has been implemented. We're really just, churning that property into be as optimal as it can be. And then we'll be winding one down. So that's been one of the challenges. It's because, certain things that were done prior to my time, that was a lot of the initial work and the research that I had to do to kind of figure out how does every property work, and one other thing that may not be known is that we're 100% third-party managed by best-in-class property managers. Well, they may be best in class, in a respective market, and they do, they're going to have their strengths and their weaknesses just like any organization. But one thing we needed to know was who's stronger in ESG, who's stronger in sustainability, who's stronger with utility and capital improvements with respect to, efficiency measures. That's one thing we had to kind of do. And then ultimately we created a level set. So that way we're propping up maybe the managers who's fantastic with capital management and property management, but they may not have had this push for ESG yet. Either way, they're still at a level set, while we're also not going to hinder on the other side, the management company it's the poster child for ESG. So we're not going to, or we didn't want to step on anyone's toes, but we wanted to have this standard, across all of our portfolios. So we do have 3 different funds, but they're very unique in their strategy. And not to say it's copy and paste, but we're definitely copying and pasting the things that are done very well, and we're also evolving and as well as correcting some mistakes or incorporating systematic changes to really drive and elevate our platform.
John, what's been the most difficult thing from an implementation standpoint? As you you've been at ESG for 80 years, right? But still, it becomes a razor focus at that moment. What's been difficult?
Well, I think this is a common theme that the most difficult thing is data collection. I think our saying internally is you can't measure, or you can't improve what you don't measure, and that's obviously pretty important for data coverage. So we're still working through that. I think we made some pretty good progress on that data coverage in the prior year, but since it depends market by market, how do we get that data if it's not necessarily readily available? And that's going to be a continued struggle until the utility companies are giving the data freely and easily. So
I've often observed it takes 3 years. The first year is to figure out what you don't know. The second year is to try to improve it, and the third year is to refine it. Does it sound about right for you guys?
Dead on. Absolutely. We did a lot of things well. I was very surprised, and not necessarily a knock at how it was done before, but we had, for the most part, a lot of the best practices that kind of are signaled in GRESB, and a lot of it was just kind of documentation and aligning to the standard, aligning to I guess, data warehouse storage facility where we could keep track of all the moving pieces across our portfolios.
Well, you certainly found the right folks in Goby, right? I'm sure that they helped you with that data piece, and then having Michelle and her team be part of sort of documenting things and talking about what others are doing outside of your four walls, right? That's a lot of what this is all about.
Absolutely. I don't know where we would be today without Goby and our other third-party vendors, but much of our, any accomplishment that we have had is definitely credited to them. So.
Well, we'll take that back. I love that. Thanks. Shameless plug. Why not? But I do appreciate that, and we've been super excited to see that. And I know here in a couple minutes we'll probably comment on some of the exciting increases that we've had over the last couple of months. But I did also want to shameless plug back to GRESB. I think we really found, especially within your account with across the 3 different funds, GRESB really has allowed for that foundational communication on some of those aspects, right? And that's really what it kind of brings to the table, is giving you almost another place to compare those funds against each other through a third party. And I think, Dan, that's obviously a key intent of what GRESB looks to do and continues to do, and kind of moving forward in those trends. But I find GRESB to be that foundation to help support with that streamline of communication. It sounds like that's been a key aspect that you've seen as well.
Well, so I think there's a couple of pieces here. One is this whole LP-GP communication, right? So that's, hey, what are we doing as a company? How do we package all this stuff up and communicate this out? The LPs that are consuming the data are really moving to do a number of things that hadn't been done before. The number one is a carbon footprint. So being able to elevate data, whether it's the actual data or being able to fill in a couple blanks to give your clients the best knowledge possible on their GHG footprint and the energy and the water consumption, that is where the whole industry has spent the last decade working on to get to this point now, which is going to be our work going forward. So we've got the Paris Agreement, and that says 1.5 degrees, has a line that looks like this. Where does your portfolio line up against that? These are the things that are on the minds of LPs that are investing in the next fund, because guess what? That next fund, if it's a 10-year commitment, is kind of in that 2030 strike zone that was being talked about at the COP convention not too long ago. So there's the one way of the LP-GP communication. The second thing is what's happening internally at the firm. So giving the Johns of the world a tool that says, hey, here's how we're doing compared to people outside of us. This is a series of best practices, because the way that GRESB is set up is every question is Boolean. Do you do this thing or not? Could be a policy, it could be data management, whatever it is. And then once you answer yes, good, better, and best start to show up in those answers that are down below. So it provides this roadmap, a framework, whatever analogy you want to use, to companies out there to say, okay, we've been really focused on our business and running this thing. And a lot of the ESG constructs are important but not urgent. And so it creates some tension, it creates some movement along the way. And it's a great tool for that as well. And my sense is that the folks at Mesirow have been using it both ways.
I would agree. And I think that's how we kind of see that added value and something to be able to really track the ongoing performance as well, right? Like part of that communication is to show the progress as well, because that's what investors do want to see. And I was super excited. I think that's a great segue into, not to give like too much of behind the scenes, but John, I was super excited to see kind of the results that you've had from that year 1, year 2 into this next year. Huge improvements from last year to this year. And I think a lot of that is related to the data coverage improvements we've been able to see. And exactly as Dan was saying, it's almost like the first year you're planning, the second year you're implementing, then you're refining it continuously. So we're now seeing the effect of that implementation. So congrats, because I think that speaks volumes across all 3 of your funds. But I'm also excited to talk about 2022. So we're headed into the end of 2021. Again, I don't know how that happened, but we are here. Would love to talk about that for a few minutes. So I might lean on Joshua for just a minute. I know he's getting involved with you on some of those initiatives, and then we'll let you expand on it. But Joshua, maybe comments on a few things of what you're seeing with John and his team, and even beyond John's team of initiatives heading into 2022.
Yeah, absolutely. John and I are talking a lot about, what's to come. I think Goby and Mesirow have matching ambitions in that way to see another score increase like we did in the past year. So John, the first thing, let's talk about DEI metrics that are going on within Mesirow. What's been your approach to tracking that and then moving into communicating it externally?
So as I kind of alluded to in my introduction of Mesirow, just one thing to preface is that DEI is almost one of Mesirow's pillars of corporate responsibility. And with that, our firm has a separate and focused DEI Council. So this council is charged with executing the, Mesirow's DEI 6-point commitment plan in the program. So ultimately, I kind of want to take this opportunity to read directly from their 2021 annual DEI report, kind of talking about the council's progress and actions that they've taken. So kind of just to talk about, the DEI measurement and assessment of the program itself. In 2021, the DEI audit and assessment was completed, and from that, and it was completed by Korn Ferry. So they've actually identified, a few improvements that the firm is going to take into consideration and implement throughout the firm. So with that, or in addition to that, there's kind of a recruitment update that we've received. So some of the progress that we've actually experienced in our DEI program is that the firm-wide hire rate for diverse candidates increased over 30%, and for women hires, or hires that are women, that's upwards of 40%. And that's obviously compared to the baseline, but the tracking of this information is definitely increasing, and that's being driven by the Mesirow corporate DEI Council.
And I think that's the trend right now in a good way. And I don't mean to make it sound like, oh, this is trendy. That came out wrong. But I meant to say of just getting more tangible in terms of metrics on the social side. I think, we've seen great policies and great initiatives and great engagement strategies that are just innate to good corporate responsibility. But what I'm seeing is that we're now becoming more data driven and tracking more of those metrics and seeing that year over year trend and being able to do comparative analytics of, hey, I've increased our hiring by 20% and that diversity percentage has kind of followed, so that we're just getting more data driven on not just the E side, but on the S and the G side. So I think that's really exciting to hear, and how you guys are kind of getting to that level of granularity, because I do see, and one of the last things we'll talk about today is like, okay, what are the trends we're excited about for 2022? I personally see social and governance metric trends being very prevalent into next year. So this is a great example of that.
Yeah, and I think for the most part, as I've already said several times, Meserow's been doing it before it was cool. We've had various initiatives ingrained in our culture. And this would have been before the summer of 2020 with the the civil unrest as a result of George Floyd in this stream of corporate awareness. We've been doing it prior, and it kind of begs the question of, oh, why don't you have this information? Well, up until recently, it really wasn't asked for. Yeah. But it also goes back to that you can't improve what you don't measure. Yeah. So if we have this commitment, or we do have this commitment, we need to, obviously it's evidence of the firm that we need to be tracking these metrics in order to measure how well our program is doing. Yeah. Well, I think that's fantastic. And maybe in essence of our time for today, I'd love to hear maybe like one or two more items, Josh and John, if you guys want to highlight on it, and then we'll close out with 2022 excitement. But Josh, go ahead with the other.
Yeah, so carrying on with that sentiment of you can't improve what you don't measure. Mesirow are currently undergoing their first waste audit. Can you talk about how that decision came to pass in terms of deciding to undergo the audit, and then what you kind of are hoping for in terms of your strategy outcomes from the audit?
Yeah, absolutely. So high level, we're going to be almost truncating or, putting each of these, call it the focus, not necessarily flavor of the week, but the what's the trend, what's the important issue. We're going to start pulling these out and looking at them, kind of holistically. Are we able to do something and leverage our scale, leverage our organization, and not necessarily, rely on, property A located in Dallas, Texas. So we're being mindful of what needs to be kind of collected, from a firm or entity level, and going from there. I apologize, I did get off track. So,
no, I think it's a good off track though, because it's talking about it more from a high level, which is exactly the intention.
Waste is hard, right?
Waste is hard. That's the understatement of the day.
So waste
is messy. That's an even better one. I don't know.
It's always kind of been messy, and it's it's garbage, literally. And so I don't think the industry places as much of an importance on it. So what we've done recently, we identified one of these nodes, if you will, that potentially could be leveraged, and we can utilize our scale. And that scale, we ultimately found at a conference a waste vendor who, it's ultimately third-party management of waste. But with that, we're making sure that we're paying the right amounts. So that's obviously important from a fiduciary responsibility, but also from an environmental standpoint, it's giving us a lot more visibility into the waste stream. Where is the waste being diverted? Is it being diverted? And is there anything we can do to increase the amount that is diverted from landfill?
Well, and to bring back to the finance side of things, right? There's a cost implication as well when it comes to diversion. So I think that's something that's oftentimes forgot in our industry is, yes, obviously it's best to divert as much waste as possible, but there is an actual cost implication. I think waste, to the extent, is super messy, and that you have many times no national waste contract. It's each its own individual property that's dealing with it, which is very inefficient. And just the cost on the handling of the waste overall. So I think the initiative of diving in from a waste evaluation to optimize that, I also see as a moving trend. Before, I would have said the last couple of years, the trend was, let's just get access to the data. Let's figure out what our waste is. And I genuinely think we're getting more smart about the implications of a better waste management system and process and tracking and contracting. Well, maybe just again in kind of essence of time. So I think those are some really exciting trends that I actually would 100% agree about for heading into 2022. But maybe we'll round robin it for a quick minute to close us out for our last Winters and Winters session of 2021 on what maybe we're most excited about heading into next year, trends we think we're going to see. Dan, I might kick it back over to you as my counterpart here. What are you excited about? Any insights for GRESB? Any like little things we should, share out there in the world or not? It's cool too. We'll make it hidden for the next year.
Well, so the first thing is I'm wearing my snowman tie because we are in the holiday season. And so thanks for pointing that out. So we talked about DEI. That's the S. S is squishy. It's hard to track these things. And so every organization is going to find its own issues that they want to track. GRESB is a good tool to do that. We're really focused on climate risk and transition risk. The good news with GRESB is it's going to stay stable, and it'll
we might have lost John in the last second.
Okay, hold on. Let's get him connected here. All right.
Sorry.
So, perfect. So GRESB is staying stable for 2022 and likely also for 2023. And so this gives organizations time to keep chugging, keep acquiring that data in a structured way, structured non-financial data. And then in 2024, what we've done is we've kicked off an engagement with all of our global members. Remember, this year we had 1,520 participants in the benchmark. And we're talking about what does performance mean? So performance likely looks like, where are you compared to the Paris Agreement? Are you above or below the line? What's your transition risk? How's your climate risk? Can you do these kinds of analysis internally? Are you equipped to do that? So 2022, stable. 2023, probably preparing for a more of an evolution than we've seen in the past. So don't rest on your laurels, is my point.
So my takeaway is 2024 expect changes. I'm gonna just simplify that statement, but I thought it was a good one, and I think it's important, right? We have to continue to progress and grow. Joshua, I'll ask you before we head off to John to maybe close us out.
Yeah, I think similar to your point earlier, Michelle, about getting more tangible data in social and governance areas, but also environmental. As John said, waste is garbage, and it's a very hard sector to track data in across the country, across the world even. So kind of streamlining that, getting more tangible data that can be used in strategies going forward. Within GRESB, from strictly the points perspective, I've seen a lot of clients that have a lot of room for improvement and opportunities in building certifications. And I know Mesirow have their LEED Platinum certified HQ, but the focus is kind of shifting for them even into Energy Star as well as health and wellness certifications. So it's exciting to see different avenues. There's so many different platforms people can use to certify their building in different areas. So looking forward to seeing how that materializes.
Josh, that's a really good point. GRESB receives over 100 certifications globally that are reported, attached, and appended to these buildings. So LEED, sure, could also be Energy Star, could be IREM, could be, find your use case. But having a trust but verify regime out there at the building level is something that's rather important to institutional investors.
Yeah, agreed. John, on your end, 2022, anything super exciting that you want to share, or that you're focused on, or that you're hoping to see?
So one of the things I'm definitely excited for is to see, kind of what happens with our newest portfolio that is enrolled in GRESB. At the time of filing, we only had one investment in that fund. We've since, we've definitely, spent some money this year. So we're going to be building that portfolio. We're going to be liquidating. So it'll be interesting to see, now that we have kind of the different phases, what happens with our portfolios and what happens to them in GRESB as our portfolios change. Outside of that, definitely looking forward to seeing what else or what other data I'm able to collect I've pretty much called every utility company and gotten in touch with customer service, and right now I'm kind of treating it as a game. Is can I contact anyone back office and get access to this information that they have? There's a lot to look forward to, and 2022 will be definitely a busy year, just like 2021 has, and in the year before.
I don't think it ever slows down, even though I always think it will. It never does. But I couldn't agree more. And I think the only thing I'll add is just, I'm hopeful heading into 2022 that there's just continued engagement and community across ESG. I think, I was really we were hurt a little bit with the pandemic, we weren't able to socialize in person, but I think we've somehow continued to push beyond that through things like this. Now we're all doing videos sharing that never happened before. And so maybe there's a nice little environmental impact where we're not flying as much, but I am excited we've now figured out how to manage to an extent, right, of doing things like this and continuing that engagement more in person. But I'm just excited to see how that continues to progress and grow into 2022. And I think the silver lining of COVID, which I hate saying that there is even one, is it really has brought to light some of the value that ESG offers to these investments and to these investors. So continuing to see that grow and take off exponentially on my end. But
Michelle, interestingly, we had like an 8, maybe to 10% growth rate year on year on year. When COVID hit, it went to 25. So the slope of our line went from this to that. And it's participants in the benchmark. So there's some wind in the sails at ESG. I think we all are appreciating the fact that the earth isn't doing too well. We watched a town get liquidated in British Columbia over the summer. We've seen heat waves and all of the calamities. Great. So we're in the real property business. People are very focused on this. I think that the slope of the line will do this, or maybe even, right? Yeah.
If our calendars are any indication, I feel like it's only, and this is a good thing. It's something you can't be upset about, but agreed, absolutely agreed. And that's a really cool statistic, Dan, that I enjoy, that I knew there was a huge growth, but to that extent is pretty exciting from the year-over-year comparison. So all about the metrics, right? Well, thank you guys so much for the time today. This was great. Wishing everyone a happy, safe holiday season. Looking forward to continuing to connect into 2022. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, you.